The docking bay of the Celestial Accord shimmered with energy fields and gleamed floors, its towering archways echoing with the hum of translation drones and diplomatic escorts. Princess Val Aara of the Zix Dominion stepped from her obsidian-skinned cruiser with the grace of someone bred for ceremony and conquest. Her armored gown, spun from woven Vither silk, shimmered violet and gold under the station's artificial suns. 4 calculating eyes scanned the reception chamber not out of curiosity, but assessment. Every movement was deliberate, every breath purposeful. She was not here to be impressed. She was here to evaluate threats, escorted by an honor guard. Of silent Zixian sentinels, Val Aara made her way through the Accord's marble-like corridors, where alien banners fluttered in synthesized breezes. The Interstellar Peace Summit had drawn leaders from every known quadrant. The Tholger warlords floated in pressurized chambers. The crystalline Iliari glided silently across polished stone. Even the reclusive Etherians had sent a spectral envoy. But it was the humans who arrived last, fashionably late, unannounced, and UNBOTHERED. Captain Elias Carter disembarked from his vessel not with pomp, but with a crooked grin and a leather jacket slung over one shoulder, like a tourist lost in the wrong part of the galaxy. Val Aara caught her first glimpse of him across the diplomatic atrium, tall, broad-shouldered, and despite the casual posture, unmistakably aware of every eye on him. He did not bow. He did not flash credentials. He simply nodded at the security drones and walked in like he belonged. It was infuriating. Val's antennae twitched in annoyance. "This is their envoy?" She asked her advisor, Ambassador Threx, through a private link. Threx gave a subtle nod. Captain Elias Carter, decorated naval officer. Survived the Icarian Rift with a single shuttle and a broken transmitter. Negotiated the ceasefire at Roth Sector using only a bottle of something called whiskey and a deck of ancient playing cards. Undisciplined, Val muttered. Effective, Threx replied. Whispers trailed behind Carter like a solar wake. Delegates leaned in close, voices hushed, sharing tales that flickered between disbelief and awe. One of the Mathuri scholars claimed humans domesticated lava serpents on Tau Sindar. A Crixian trader swore on his mother clutch that Earthlings once ate the brain spores of a sentient fungus during peace talks just to prove a point. Did you hear what they did on Draxelon 4? Hissed a scaled diplomat from Graln 5. They rebuilt a fallen city in 3 cycles. With their hands, said another. They turned the war beasts loose, then captured them again for training. Val Aara rolled her eyes. Superstition. Propaganda dressed as awe. She turned away from the murmurs, unwilling to give weight to rumors spun from desperation and ignorance. Her people had faced extinction and clawed their way back to power. They did not bend to myth, especially not Earth's. And yet, as Carter passed her with a brief glance amused, casual, unthreatened Val felt a sliver of unease slide beneath her composure. Not because of what he did, but because of what he might do next. The grand dining hall of the Celestial Accord was a marvel of interstellar architecture, an amphitheater of mirrored glass and gravity-defiant spires that shimmered under the soft pulses of a false nebula projected overhead. Beneath the swirling lights of simulated stardust, tables arranged in concentric rings bore the finest delicacies from across the galaxy. Ethereal sky fruit from the Etherians, gelatinous protein cores from the Tholger, and the famously hallucinogenic bloom roots of Velkprime. But none of it mattered because at the center table, seated like a man unaware he sat atop a powder keg, was Captain Elias Carter, slicing into something that could not be there. Princess Val Aara halted, mid-step, her breath catching. She blinked once, then twice, her 4 violet eyes narrowing to slits. Her antennae bristled in involuntary alarm. Spread elegantly on Carter's plate was a thick, Charred cut of dark flesh glazed with a seared crust, steam curling off the meat like whispers of war. She knew that flesh. Every Zythex born did. Cracks dot. The word itself pulsed through her memory like a venom spike. The apex predator of Zythex Prime, not just a beast the beast. Born from molten swamps, wrapped in armor-plated hide that deflected. Kinetic shells, breathing acid that could chew through battleships. It had taken the lives of millions during the Purge Wars. Her brother, Prince Kale, had died facing one in the Valley of Stoneblood. And now, it was being served with roasted root vegetables. Girt half a step, her composure shivering like fractured crystal. Impossible, she muttered. Carter, oblivious or pretending to be, stabbed a slice of the meat with his fork, lifted it to his mouth, and took a slow, thoughtful bite. He chewed, swallowed, smiled. Tastes like a cross between lobster and a ribeye, he said, addressing no one and everyone. Little gamey, but the char brings out the smokiness. Gasp rippled through the room. Several delegates turned pale. A crystalline Iliari ambassador dropped their chalice. It shattered on the floor, forgotten. The methane-breathing Tholger began hyperventilating inside his breathing sphere. Even the stoic envoy from Cygnus Prime emitted a high-frequency warning. "Trill, you eat them?" Val demanded, her voice razor-sharp and slicing through the silence. Carter blinked at her as if just noticing the tension. Yeah? I mean, not every day. But once we figured out they were edible, we gave it a go. Took a few tries. You gotta remove the acid sacs and those neurotoxin glands near the spine. But once you prep it right, he gestured to the plate. Pretty damn good. Val's mandibles clenched. Her culture considered even the sight of a dead Craxer a sacred omen. Their bodies were burned, never dissected. Eating one? That was a desecration beyond language. The galaxy had strict culinary taboos, and this act had just shattered one of its oldest. A Crixian diplomat collapsed. The delegation from Zitherus walked out. The Samarian priest began reciting a ritual for planetary absolution. Even the eye interpreter glitched, its synthetic voice looping in disbelief. Does not compute. Does not compute. Does not, Captain Carter? Barked Ambassador Li Chun, the human envoy, standing and rubbing her temples like a woman holding back a scream. We talked about this. We agreed no cultural disruption. That includes apex predators. Elias lifted his hands. What? Nobody said anything specific about Craxer meat. Besides, Earth has its share of monsters. We ate those too. Tigers, crocodiles, lions once, even a megalodon. Val's voice was a blade. Those were your monsters. This was ours. Her gaze met his across the polished void of the banquet hall. It wasn't anger he saw in her eyes. It was something older, something colder. Fear. Not for the beast he had consumed, but for what it said about him. About his kind. You hunted it. You killed it. And then you devoured it? Carter gave a half smile. Didn't just kill it. We learned how to farm them. The silence was nuclear. Time seemed to freeze. Princess Val Aara swayed on her feet, the words slamming into her like kinetic rounds. They domesticated. The Craxer. For the Zythex Dominion, the Craxer had been a nightmare, a god beast, a punishment written into the DNA of the planet itself. Entire seasons of mourning were held after attacks. Temples were built in honor of the fallen, and now, humans bred them, roasted them, served them with side dishes. A shift happened in that moment, not in Val alone, but in every diplomat present. In the way the galaxy looked at humans. The realization bloomed like a silent detonation. If they could conquer this, if they could eat this, what couldn't they? The fear didn't come from the flesh on Carter's plate. It came from the quiet certainty that humans were something worse. Then monsters. They were the kind of creature that turned monsters into lunch. The chaos did not erupt all at once. It built like a pressure breach in a vacuum-sealed hull. Silent at first, then catastrophic. One of the Thulger attendants shrieked in a shrill, warbling code as their breathing apparatus spasmed, venting green-tinted gas. The crystalline ambassador from Iliari staggered backward, their shimmering facets fracturing into stress fractures. Even the towering warmongers from the Iron Scale Accord flinched at the sight of the flesh Krexer, unmistakable, being cut, chewed, swallowed, and complimented like some back-alley street snack. In the upper gallery, a high priest of the Zitherian Path of Flame dropped his ceremonial scepter. It clanged against the polished black stone of the hall like a funeral bell. The silence that followed was crushing. Princess Val Aara did not move. Her 4 eyes were locked on Elias Carter, the human captain who had somehow become the epicenter of a cultural implosion. He still chewed, still smiled, still wiped the corner of his mouth with a napkin like this was just another Tuesday lunch back on Earth. "This is sacrilege," hissed High Curator Dezen from the Thurin Assembly. His voice was brittle, his translucent exhaustion mottling with shock. "This violates every known diplomatic culinary accord." "Captain," Ambassador Li Chun said again, her voice low and strained as if she were trying to contain a wildfire. With her bare hands, "Please explain yourself, now." Elias set down his fork. "All right, look. Back on Earth, we ran into a few of these Kraxer things. You ran into them?" Val Aara snapped, her voice crackling with fury. "Those beasts are supposed to be contained within Zythex Prime's restricted planetary core. There are no colonies near their habitat. There are no safe approaches. Not even orbital scans can penetrate the storm cradle region where they live." Carter shrugged, unfazed. "Yeah, turns out they hitched a ride on a mining freighter. Broke loose. Killed about 42 people before we figured out what we were dealing with." He paused, then added, "Well, what we were eating." A gasp spread through the hall. Delegates whispered in half-formed horror. One of the AI archivists flatlined and rebooted. A counselor from the verdant reaches began weeping, unable to process the cultural desecration. "We didn't just eat it," Elias continued, now clearly aware of the attention he'd gathered. "We studied it, tracked it, found its weaknesses, realized its meat had high protein density and regenerative enzymes. Took us 6 tries before we figured out how to neutralize the acid glands before butchering it without destroying our equipment. But once we got the prep right, man, the possibilities opened up." Val Aara staggered back half a step, her vision pulsing red with disbelief. She had trained in military strategy, had survived assassins, coups, and invasions, but nothing had prepared her for the sight of a human talking about the nightmare of her people like it was some farm-raised cattle. "You speak of it like it was a puzzle," she breathed. Elias met her gaze calmly. "Every monster's a puzzle, Princess. You just have to be willing to solve it." That broke her, not with rage but with fear. Deep, visceral fear, because he wasn't bragging. He wasn't mocking. He was telling the truth. The Kraxer had been a living extinction event on Zythex Prime, a wrath given form. The Zix had built entire rituals around simply surviving an encounter with one. And here was a man who had killed it, cooked it, and posted the recipe. Elias leaned back in his chair, clearly finished with his meal. "You ever see what a Kraxer looks like from the inside?" he asked, conversational. "Beautiful bone structure, double hearts. Smart too. We had to outthink it before we could outgun it." "You outthought it?" Val whispered, her voice hollow. He nodded. "That's kind of what we do." The chamber was still. The galaxy itself, it seemed, had paused to listen. Princess Val Aara turned slowly, her gaze sweeping the assembly. And what she saw chilled her more than Elias Carter ever could. She saw fear not just in the Zithek's delegation, but in every ambassador's eyes. The fear that they had miscalculated. That the species they thought crude, chaotic, and impulsive was, in fact, the most methodical predator in the room. This wasn't just about food. This was about power. Power through audacity, through adaptation, through the willingness to take what others feared and make it into something mundane. Elias Carter hadn't broken a law that day. He'd broken an illusion, and once shattered, illusions didn't rebuild. Humanity, she murmured, does not conquer with fleets or fleets alone. They conquer with forks, with curiosity, with nerve. She looked back at Elias one last time. And for the first time in her life, the princess of the Zix dominion understood what it meant to be truly outmatched. A hush lingered over the celestial accord in the wake of the banquet catastrophe, the kind of silence that didn't soothe but simmered. The summit's once celebratory ambiance had curdled into something brittle, every word now measured, every glance sharpened. Conversations among delegates had transformed into guarded whispers behind sealed sound shields. The image of Elias Carter slicing into the Craxer was burned into the summit's collective memory like a scar across time. Princess Val Aara stood alone in the starlit observatory chamber, her cloak trailing behind her like shadow. The chamber's transparent dome offered a panoramic view of the void beyond, stars swirling in slow, eternal spirals. But she saw none of it. Her mind was tethered to Earth's captain, the smiling predator who had devoured a god. A chime echoed. "Enter," she said. Elias stepped into the chamber, hands in his pockets, silhouette framed against the glow of distant suns. "You requested me," he said, his tone casual but curious. "I didn't summon you," she said coolly. He gave a slight grin. "Your assistant said otherwise. She's overstepped." "Then I'll overstay." He walked to the edge of the chamber, close enough to the curve of the glass that the stars reflected across his face like scattered sparks. He looked small beside the infinite, yet unshaken like a man who had stared into worse and walked away. Chewing. Val approached him, but not too close. She stood at a careful distance, hands clasped behind her back. Her gaze swept over him like a weapon being drawn. "Do you understand what you've done?" she asked quietly. "I ate lunch," Elias replied. She turned her head slightly, antennae twitching with restrained anger. "You consumed a sacred terror of my people. You reduced centuries of fear, myth, and mourning to seasoning." He didn't flinch. "I didn't do it to insult your people, yet insult you did." Elias exhaled, finally dropping the smirk. "Princess, I get it. You have history, ritual, pain, but monsters don't care about reverence. They don't respect worship. We learned that the hard way back home." Val's gaze narrowed. "What did Earth fear?" He was quiet for a moment. "Then, ourselves. We feared what we'd become. And when the monsters came, real ones, we didn't have time to build temples. We built traps." She studied him, the fire in her chest cooling to embers. There was something in his voice that didn't match the arrogance of earlier. "Oh wait, a history. We once feared the Craxer more than death itself," she said, voice softer now. "My brother was devoured by one. They retrieved only his crest." "I'm sorry," Elias said, and for once it wasn't a formality. "We've lost people too. That's why we fight back. Not to mock the beast, but to make sure it doesn't win next time." Val turned toward the stars again, but her thoughts were inward. "When I saw you eat it," she said slowly, "I felt something I hadn't in years. A fracture, not in my pride, in my certainty. If humans can hunt what we worshipped in fear, what else have we misunderstood about you?" Elias chuckled lightly, not mocking, but honest. Everything, probably. A long silence stretched between them. Beyond the glass, a comet burned quietly through the dark like a blade across velvet. "I've heard the rumors," Val said. "On Draxilon 4, on the Red Belt, on Sarath's moons. Stories of your kind surviving against impossible odds. But I dismiss them as myth. The way we once thought the Craxer couldn't be killed. We're not gods," Elias said. "We're just stubborn." Val turned to face him again, her voice now a whisper edged with warning. "That stubbornness frightens the galaxy," he nodded. "It should." There it was again, that terrifying humility. Not the kind born of meekness, but of quiet conviction. The kind that didn't need weapons to threaten, only truth. Val Aara stepped closer, close enough now to see the tired lines beneath Elias' eyes. A warrior's weariness. A survivor's guilt. "You're not what I expected," she said. He looked at her, no smirk this time. "Neither are you." She held his gaze a moment longer, then turned away, the faintest twitch of her mandibles betraying unease. "Go," she said softly. He nodded and walked toward the exit, but just before the door irised open, he glanced back. "We don't kill monsters for sport," he said. "We kill them to prove we still can." Then he vanished into the corridor. Val stood alone again, but she no longer felt composed. Something inside her had shifted. The princess of the Zix Dominion had faced warlords, death cults, and political assassins. But never before had she looked at a man smiling, polite, blood on his hands, and wondered if her empire was already obsolete. The war chamber of the Celestial Accord was a sanctum reserved for crisis. Not cuisine, but this day blurred lines that no civilization had prepared for. Seated in a spiraling array were the appointed delegates of over 42 species, each bearing the weight of empires. The holographic table at the center displayed not battle maps, but a rotating anatomical rendering of the Craxer, its skeletal structure, venom glands, digestive tracts. Details humans had no business knowing. But did Princess Val Aara entered. With measured grace, but beneath the polished armor and ceremonial garb, her mind churned like a disturbed hive. 3 days had passed since the banquet incident, and the summit's atmosphere had calcified into dread. The mere mention of Earth now triggered security sweeps and instinctive flinches. The Zitherian senator, Lord McVallen, pounded a clawed fist on the table. "This cannot stand. If the humans can dismantle a Craxer like a child unspooling twine, what else have they dismembered in silence?" Across from him, the Thulgar warlord flared his methane vents in outrage. "They breed monsters for dining. What species dares domesticate extinction?" Even the robotic envoy from Cygnus Prime, normally mute and calculating, emitted a stuttering cascade of red-lit symbols, a warning signal not issued since the Seraph Wars. Ambassador Li Chun sat still, jaw clenched, eyes flicking across the digital profiles of the room. Her voice, when it came, was ice on glass. Captain Carter acted without approval. He'll be disciplined. But let's be clear, Earth has not violated any interstellar law. Val Aara rose slowly, deliberately. "Perhaps not the laws you recognize," she said, her voice cutting through the clamor like a blade. "But your species has violated something older. Something far more fragile than statutes the balance." Eyes turned to her. 4 of her own narrowed on Li Chun. "You? Humans are not gods," Val continued. "And yet you behave as if the universe is your test kitchen. You warp nature, redefine terror, and consume what others have only dared name in whispers." A murmur followed, half agreement, half fear. "Respectfully," Li Chun said, "we adapt. We overcome. That's why we're still here." A subtle silence followed, one that carried the weight of extinction events, lost homeworlds, entire species broken before adaptation had a chance. The hologram shifted. Without warning, new data flickered into view. Pulsing in deep crimson, a subspecies of Kraxer, smaller, faster, bioengineered, a live feed, followed taken from a human facility. It showed containment cells, precision feeding systems, even automated butchering drones. "This footage is real," hissed the Verdani representative. "Taken from an orbital black site near Jupiter's third moon. They aren't just studying Kraxer biology, they're modifying it." Outcry exploded. Half the delegates rose to their feet, shouting. Translations layered over each other into incomprehensible noise. An alien envoy collapsed from neural overload. Security drones lowered from the ceiling, scanning for hostilities. Val Aara did not shout. She stared at the feed in cold horror. "You weren't satisfied with surviving the monster," she whispered. "You improved it." Li Chun stood, finally shaken. That footage was stolen. Misrepresented, was it? Val's voice trembled. "Because what I see is a civilization that no longer fears monsters. It creates them." A voice from the entrance spoke then, low but clear. "No," Elias Carter said as he stepped forward. "We become them when we need to." All heads turned. His presence alone carried more dread than warships in orbit. And yet he stood unarmed, unguarded, and completely composed. "You don't survive Earth without becoming what once hunted you," he said. "We didn't want this war with nature. It came for us. We adapted." The delegates stared in stunned silence. Carter tapped the holocontrols, switching the projection to something else, a list. Dozens of species, apex predators, all cataloged, all logged, all edible. "This," he said, "is what happens when you stop worshipping monsters. You learn they bleed." Val Aara stepped toward him, voice shaking with something between rage and awe. "And if the galaxy ever becomes a threat?" He met her gaze with eyes that had seen fire fall from skies and walked away unsinged. "Then we learn you bleed too." The chamber froze. The unthinkable had been spoken not as a threat, but as a certainty. And the worst part? No one could argue it. When Carter left the room, no one followed. Not out of protocol. Out of instinct. The kind one develops in the presence of an apex predator. That night, 5 military alliances were revised. 3 species reopened dormant weapons programs. Zythek's Dominion requested urgent updates to their orbital defense grid. And far away on Earth, a new motto was etched into the plaque outside the orbital steakhouse. "Fear feeds no one, but monsters do." The storm on Zythek's Prime rolled in not with thunder, but with silence. It was ceremonial day in the capital of Harana time, meant for reflection, remembrance, and ancestral mourning. But today, the sacred halls of the Temple of Fallen Valor stood empty. The fires along the Bridge of Names were unlit, and the eternal flame beneath the obsidian statue of Kale the Brave Val Aara's brother was extinguished. By order of the Crown. In its place. Val Aara had convened a gathering in the Dominion's Hall of Legacy, a circular chamber, surrounded by polished obsidian walls carved with the names of every citizen lost to the Kraxer Wars. Over 1 million names. 1 million ghosts, and yet all of them felt suddenly small. Dwarfed not by time, but by truth. Val Aara stood at the center of the chamber, surrounded by her high council, temple clerics, and a private, unmarked holonode projecting a forbiddance. Image a human facility. Earth's black site. Kraxer farms. Surgical tables. Butcher units. Cryovats. The very monsters her people had bled for now tagged, processed, and priced. She wore no crown today. No ceremonial blades. Just a deep violet robe woven from mourning threads. Her eyes were dull with exhaustion, but hard as carved iron. "This," she said, gesturing to the image, is our legacy through their eyes. The council stirred. Elder Vizan, old enough to remember the original Kraxer assault on Zedek's Prime, shook his head. I warned you. Majesty, when you opened dialogue with Earth, when you invited their fleets to our moons, you opened our gates to predators who wear skin like peacekeepers. Is that what they are? She asked, almost gently. No, they're worse. They wear civility like armor. They speak diplomacy with predators' teeth. Val said nothing. Her eyes remained on the footage. A Kraxer cub barely hatched scanned, chipped, and lifted onto a preparation table. It squealed. Not a roar. Not the ancient scream of horror she remembered as a child, but a weak, high-pitched mewl. Powerless. Have they broken the beast? She whispered. No, Vizan said. They have replaced it. Val stepped forward and placed a single object on the pedestal beneath her. A Kraxer tooth, large as her forearm, etched with her brother's name. It was all that had been recovered of him. She stared at it, unblinking. Do you know, she said quietly, when I saw him fall, when the beast tore through his command unit and we found only this, I swore no one would forget the terror of that day. Her voice wavered, and now that terror is sold in vacuum-sealed pouches. No one dared speak. She turned to the clerics. Bring the flame. They hesitated. Majesty, the right of flame is sacred. Bring it. One stepped forward, hands trembling, carrying the flame of remembrance in a ritual urn. Val reached for it and then, in one swift, horrifying motion, poured it over the tooth. Gasps filled the chamber. Smoke coiled upward in a spiral. The enamel blackened. The carvings of Kale's name hissed and cracked. And then it was gone. A relic, she said, must be buried in honor. But an illusion must be burned. She turned to the council. For generations, we feared monsters. Built identities around survival. Constructed myths around suffering. But fear is not sacred. Pain is not a foundation for strength. We mistook trauma for truth. The room remained frozen. She raised her chin, and the humans showed us the lie. Outside, the twin sons of Zythex Prime cast a long shadow over the Temple Mount. Distant. Storm winds howled across the chasm walls, but none entered the city. The gates of morning had been opened and then locked forever. That night, Val Aara did what no Zix monarch had done in 7 generations. She sent a personal communique to Earth, not through diplomatic channels, but to Elias. Carter himself dotted. Read, you broke the image of our terror. Now teach me what you see in its place. I will come alone, Dada. She sealed the message. Her hands trembled, not with fear, but with the realization that everything her people had worshipped had already been devoured. The space between Zythex Prime and Earth was not measured in light years, but in transformation. Princess Val Aara traveled in silence aboard a stealth-class diplomatic vessel, her attendants dismissed, her advisors locked out of the private chamber. No honor guard. No ceremonial robes. Just one princess in exile from the mythology of her people, chasing a truth no one dared acknowledge. The journey felt heavier than any warship she had ever commanded. She wasn't representing the Zix Dominion this time. She was something else. Now a student of the unimaginable, her vessel docked silently at Earth's lunar diplomatic port, a station built not for grand gestures but for quiet arrangements. There were no parades, no trumpets, no ceremonial arches. Just a single man waiting on the other side of the airlock, Elias Carter. He wore civilian clothing, no medals, no rank, but Val could still sense the weight of a warrior beneath his skin. His eyes locked onto hers the moment the pressurized door opened. Welcome to Earth, he said simply. Val nodded, stepping onto the platform. You received my message. I did, he said. I've prepared something for you. She followed him through a narrow corridor bathed in warm amber lighting. It was sterile, clean, and utterly unremarkable until they reached a sealed blast door with biometric locks and a silent AI security lens hovering above. Carter pressed his palm to the panel. The door hissed open. Val Aara stepped into a room. She was wholly unprepared for It wasn't a lab. It wasn't a facility. It was a gallery. Transparent display cases stretched across the chamber. Each contained bones, DNA samples, refined biographs, detailed anatomical renderings, and at the center preparation manuals. All of them cataloging the galaxy's deadliest creatures, apex predators, the worm of Caraxes, the thresher of Io5, the screaming mire beast of Trinix, and of course, the Craxer. Multiple specimens, juveniles, elders, and a single preserved heart, suspended in fluid, softly pulsing with artificial current. Val's breath caught. You collected all of them? No, Elias said quietly. We faced all of them. We buried more than we cataloged. This isn't a trophy room. Then? What is it? He pointed to a plaque on the far wall. She approached slowly. Etched into its metal surface was a single sentence. A map of the things we once feared, so we'd never have to fear them again. She stared at it for a long time. Elias stepped beside her. You asked what we see in place of monsters, he said. This is it. Not pride. Not conquest. Just memory, and the refusal to be helpless again. Val's gaze drifted back to the Craxer heart. How many worlds had to break for you to learn this? She asked. Too many, he replied. But not as many as it would have taken if we hadn't. They left the gallery and emerged into a different chamber, vast, circular, filled with aromatic steam and the unmistakable scent of grilled meat. Val Aara blinked. This is Predator's Table, Ilias said with a faint smile. The galaxy's first interspecies steakhouse. They walked past diners from a dozen species, Crixians cracking bone chitin with glee, Thulgers sipping protein vapor, even a few Zix traders picking delicately at plated cuts of once feared creatures. Laughter, toasts, shared plates. No one is afraid here, Val whispered. Fear doesn't build peace, Ilias said, but meals do. He led her to a private booth. A server approached an Aetheran with soft blue skin and no visible mouth. They bowed, then placed a platter between them, Craxer ribeye, perfectly seared, paired with roasted starch root and a side of bright leaf salad from Earth's Andes. Colony. Val stared at it. A lifetime of ancestral fear coiled in her chest. You don't have to, Elias said gently. She picked up the blade, sliced it, tasted it, chewed slowly. The silence was not fearful this time. It was reflective, deep, transformational. Set her utensils down. I can't say I'll ever enjoy this, she admitted. You don't have to enjoy it, Elias said. You just have to stop fearing it. Her eyes flicked toward him. And what of humans? She asked. What happens when the galaxy learns to fear you? He sipped his drink. They already do, he said softly. But now they also understand. U.S., that's a start. The summit resumed 2 weeks later. No declarations. No apologies. Just a subtle shift in the way the universe moved around Earth. The Zythex Dominion signed the Accord of Shared Frontiers, a treaty that included technology exchange, agricultural integration, and a controversial but voluntary apex culinary exchange program. Princess Val Aara became its official ambassador. A new saying took root on Zythex Prime, replacing the ancient oath of vengeance. We no longer fear the dark. We dine with it. And far beyond the stars, on a spinning rock where monsters were once kings, humans kept building tables instead of thrones, because they had learned something long ago. You don't defeat fear by kneeling to it. You set the table, and then you eat it.